Good evening. Thank you for tuning in to 50 Minutes, your source on historical analysis and debate. I'm your host, Nathan Blizzard. Today's topic is quite an interesting one that has many historians debating. Today's topic is, was the violence of the French Revolution justified? In order to examine this topic, we must first break down what we are considering to be violence. Violence in today's analysis is going to be described as any action that cause harm or death to an individual regardless of the legality of said action. To avoid any overgeneralizations of the events of the French Revolution, I'm going to break down the revolution to three distinct time periods, those being the Estates General to the death of King Louis XVI, followed by the uprising of the Vendée up until the death of Robespierre. The final section of the revolution is the White Terror to the rise of Napoleon. In these sections, I will go over the accomplishments of the revolution in accordance to Enlightenment theory and what happened due to violence, and the things that the revolution did that were in conflict with Enlightenment theory that were caused due to violence. After analyzing the justification of violence in all three of these sections, I will conclude with the justification of violence of the revolution from beginning to end to determine if the ends justified the means, and if not, why, and if not, how the revolution could have still happened without violence. The violence during the first period of the revolution was not justified. This is due to the Legislative Assembly not needing pressure from the people in order to pass reforms. They only need to pressure the king. King Louis XVI was an individual who hated being disliked and allowed the Assembly to pass laws guaranteeing the freedoms of speech and religion along with the rights of man, dictating that all men had a right to a fair trial and property rights. These accomplishments were made without violence. These accomplishments were also, they're all made due to individuals like Lafayette pushing the Legislative Assembly to pass these reforms and follow the Enlightenment ideals of life, liberty, and property. However, violence took all of these practices away during this time period. This is due to the National Assembly declaring martial law on July 17th. This was due to July 17th having massive Jacobin uprisings all through France, days of terror, days of rage, where people would just go out and cause harm to other people. These demonstrations happen because of men like Desmoulins, who wrote that when the people cannot get justice, they will seize it for themselves. This seizing of justice for yourself led to the eradications of all rights until the passing of the Constitution. The next thing violence did for the revolution was overthrowing the constitutional monarchy on August 10th. The palace of the king is overthrown and the commune takes the place of the old assembly. The commune then outlaws certain types of speech and orders the massacres of prisoners, individuals who were serving what was a just punishment at the time or people waiting for trial. However, due to the violence, the ideals of due process under Enlightenment theory were lost. Overall, during this time period, violence, again, was not justified, as all of the accomplishments made during the beginning of the assembly were cast aside due to the violence of extremists. Moving on to the terror time of the revolution, it's safe to say that nothing good was done during this time. The terror approved of violence against nobles, those who were not active participants in the revolution, and the weak under Robespierre's and the council's law of suspects. The violence at this time caused Mr. Ferré, a historian and well-respected member of the Historical Society, to say in his article, Interpreting the French Revolution, to describe it as a genocide against an entire class of people. Defenders of the terror may point out that the whole reason for this was the need to suppress counter-revolutionists from derailing the revolution, the Vendée being the main reason as to why the terror began. However, the people that lived in the Vendée only started a revolt due to local incidents of violence at home and the Jacobin attacks on priests, essentially their right to freedom of religion, which would infringe on their liberties. The people of the Vendée were only trying to protect the rights they have just obtained. Mr. Setcher's notes on the revolution, at minimum, he found that at least 15% of the 800,000 people living there were killed in the 9-month time period of the terror. Overall, the terror caused the deaths of 120,000 people in the Vendée alone, and 40,000 deaths of other French citizens through the guillotine or murder. That number came from factsmonster.com. And this was done mostly through the law of 22 Parallel, which allowed the mass killings of anyone accused of being anti-revolution, and the barrier to entry to be accused of being anti-revolutionist was very low. Anyone could have been declared anti-revolution if they weren't giving most of their money to the revolution. If they were doing anything that anyone would suspect them of being anti-revolutionist, or if you just had a grudge to settle. If your friend down the street owed you money and they never paid you back, well, you could just say they're being anti-revolutionist, and then they're done. They're gone, and then you don't have to worry about them not paying you back anymore. The violence of this time period was needless and unjust. When Robespierre urges the people of France to overthrow the government, again to free him on August 25th, it shows how far off course the revolution went. And that only happened because of the Assembly's issuance that terror was the order of the day on September 5th, 1793. The only thing that was granted and made from the terror was dead people. The economy was not existent. Freedoms and liberties of people were being taken away. Robespierre said that the laws of the Constitution only applied to citizens, and people deemed non-revolutionary were not citizens. And that's another justification for the law of 22 parallel and why so many people died. The only main accomplishment that the violence of the terror brought about was instigating the White Terror. And the White Terror was a little bit more justified in its violence as it brought an end to extremism through violence. And the Directory forms after the fall of the Council and the Committee of Public Safety, and they began executing anyone that had anything to do with the terror. And this is mostly justified as the people who instigated the terror were infringing on everybody's rights to life and liberty, and therefore their lives are forfeit. In addition to this, Napoleon's massacre of royalists in Paris were justified as well, as those individuals wanted to overthrow the government and were also given a chance to disperse by Napoleon before he opened fire on them. What was not justified during the White Terror, though, admittedly, is just the blatant assassination of Jacobin leaders. These killings are no better than the killings done under the terror, as there is no sense of due process, and those individuals had no right to defend their actions. Again, violence in this time makes no promotion towards benefiting the people of France. The progress made by the Directory is made through people following Enlightenment ideals to begin with again. All that happened during the White Terror is a reversal of Robespierre's policies on taking away people's rights. The people then have another uprising, again, and force the people of the Directory at gunpoint to reinstitute their rights. The people of the Directory allowed the people to have their rights back without any form of violence needed. However, the terror that was going on during the White Terror only divides the country even more, as people on both sides of the extremists try to overthrow the Directory, and this violence gives rise to Napoleon. Napoleon only wanted to overthrow the Directory because he was afraid that the revolution was going to go off course again. He was afraid that the Directory was too weak and that he needed to stop the cycle of violence. Napoleon was quoted saying, reduced to his basic ideals, the French Revolution is over. And he says that at this time because everything that the founders of the revolution wanted to achieve were achieved. People had universal suffrage. People had rights to life, liberty, and property. So there wasn't any need to continue the revolution. And everyone that died during it died needlessly. So if the violence of the French Revolution was unjust, why did it happen? Again, Mr. Freire has an answer to this. The French Revolution got rid of both God and Washington at the same time. Therefore, there is no basis for a foundation to the government to build upon, and then that leads to violence. Okay, so during the Glorious Revolution in Britain, they still had the church. They still had a foundation of morals and principles to build themselves upon. The Americans had George Washington, who was against institutionalized violence against dissidents. However, the French Revolution had Robespierre, an individual who wanted violence. It had people like Marat, who wanted people to rise up in the streets and do harm to those who he felt were anti-revolutionary. So, with those as your leaders, the only thing you're going to get out of a revolution is this violence. However, there is a way for the violence of the revolution to be justified. Had King Louis XVI said no to universal male suffrage, had he said no to the rights of man, had he said no to freedom of religion, had he opposed through violence the revolution during the meeting of the Third Estate and the tennis court oath, had he just killed them right then and there instead of allowing them to meet and deliberate, then there would have been justifications for overthrowing the monarch in the death of King Louis XVI. However, after that, after you have the revolution, after you have a new form of government set up, there is no need to revolutionize anymore. There is no need for more violence, as the people that are in power are already on the same side as you. In conclusion, the French Revolution's violence only hindered the progress they were trying to achieve by allowing those who were deemed anti-revolution to lose not only their rights, but also their lives. Thank you for watching.